Happy New Year to all.
And to you.
And I think, see, we're starting the new year off a little on the slow side here. But
Does green signify?
I like the green. It was very cheery.
we may have a new policy of changing the colors at the beginning of every year. But we haven't fully decided on that policy yet. Require a major conference and meeting. Madam Secretary, please begin. We expect we'll be joined by, I think, 2 others. So.
Yes.
But we have a quorum, so let's get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. This is the City Planning Commission Review Session. Today is Monday, January 5th, 2015, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is the proposed Urban Development Action Area Designation, project approval and special permit to facilitate over 90 units of affordable housing. Our presenter is Benita. This is item number 1, page 1.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Happy New Year. This application, New Roads Plaza, is submitted by HPD and SOBRO. The applicant requests the approval of Urban Development Action Area designation and a special permit pursuant to 74902. The application will facilitate the development of 94 units of supportive housing, and the special permit will allow the community facility FAR to be applied to a nonprofit institution with sleeping accommodation. The project site, outlined in red on the area map, is located in the Morrisania neighborhood of the Bronx in Community District 3. The site is located at the northeast corner of Washington Avenue and 164th Street, 1 block west of the 3rd Avenue commercial corridor. The zoning on the site is MX7. The MX7 special mixed-use district permits development complying with R72 and M11 requirements. The site comprises 9 lots on block 2369 and spans 12,500 square feet. 6 of the lots are vacant and owned by the city. These lots were approved for disposition by the City Planning Commission through previous ULURPs. The remaining 3 lots are privately owned with single-family homes. The remaining 3 lots on the site are occupied by single-family homes. 2 of the houses are vacant and are owned by the developer. The 3rd is currently occupied, and is in the contract for sale to the developer. Let me briefly point out the site view. This is the site for the project along 164th Street and Washington Avenue. These are the 6 vacant lots owned by the city, and these are 3 single-family homes in control of the developer. In terms of the surroundings of the site, to the southwest corner of Washington Avenue and 164th Street, which is the lot here, there's an auto repair facility with parking. Across the street on 164th Street is Steno Plaza, which is a affordable housing development. The project site itself on the corner of Washington Avenue and 164th Street, partly vacant and with 3 single-family homes, which you can see here. On the east side of the site is a hardware and lumber warehouse with parking. Across the street on Washington Avenue is an 8-story residential building with community facility on the ground floor. On the north side of the site, which is these 2 lots, is the parking and automotive maintenance facility of a tour company. Further north, at the corner of 165th Street and Washington Avenue, is a site which is currently being developed with residential. This is a project financed by HTC. The proposed building will contain approximately 77,000 square feet of floor area and will be 8 stories tall. The project will include 94 units of supportive housing targeted towards a mixed population of residents, some with special needs and others with income below 60% of AMI. The development will be built up to 5.2 FAR. The permitted FAR without the special permit is 3.44. The entrance to the building will be off of 164th Street. This is the proposed entrance to the building. The ground floor will contain office space and meeting room for the supportive services and indoor recreation space and other utilities for the residents, including laundry and mailroom, along with apartments for the residents. The development will also include indoor and outdoor recreation space. The proposed outdoor recreation space is about 5,300 square feet, which includes the rear yard and accessible terraces. In terms of the profile of the building itself, the total number of units is 94. 57 units will be studio units targeted towards the special needs population, and 37 units will be for the low-income residents. The special needs population is characterized by formerly homeless individuals with serious and persistent mental illness. The service provider for the supportive housing is Urban Pathways, who's a well-established provider for social services in the Bronx, and they also have a facility 5 blocks north of the site. And they also have several facilities throughout the city. The organization provides a continuum of care for homeless individuals to reintegrate them into permanent housing. All social services needed by the individuals will be provided on site. In consultation with each tenant, the service provider, Urban Pathways, will provide ACE management, guidance on daily living skills, medication management, financial management skills, public benefits and entitlement advocacy, peer support, crisis intervention, and other services in support of the tenants' housing stability. The project will be financed by New York State Housing Assistance Program, 9% tax credits from New York State Department of Homes and Community Renewal, and HPD's Supportive Housing Loan Program. In terms of the actions required to facilitate this project, the first is the Urban Development Action Area and project designation. The second is the approval of the special permits pursuant to 74902. There are 3 findings related to the special permit. The first finding is that the building will not unduly obstruct the light and air of the surrounding buildings and street, and the building will result in satisfactory site plan and will have a good urban design relationship to the surrounding. The second finding is that the proposed facility will not require any significant addition to the supportive services in the neighborhood. Lastly, that the streets providing access to the use will be adequate to handle the traffic that is generated by the facility.
Thank you very much, Vanita. Questions? Mr. Marie.
Vanita, thank you for your presentation. Happy New Year to you, by the way. You mentioned that there are 94 units, 57 of those will be the supportive housing units, and those are studios.
Yeah.
That's correct, right?
Yeah.
And the 37 units, what is the breakdown of those units? The other 37?
They're 1 and 2 bedrooms. I'm not sure of the breakdown between the 1 and 2 bedrooms, but I can provide that information.
Okay. My second question was, actually, I just want to make a comment, and maybe I'll remember the question. I know that this used to be, this area was the old Washington Industrial Park, Washington, if I'm not mistaken, that's what the name was. And I know that for years, Community Board 3 had worked to try and get this area more into a residential type of a district. I know it's an MX now, but can you, and I know you're not going to be able to tell me this now, can you tell us between 163rd Street to the south and 169th Street to the north and Washington Avenue, between, I'm going to say, Brook and 3rd, how many new residential developments have taken place? Because I know there's quite a few,
Yes.
and they look really nice. The neighborhood is looking really, really good. But my concern is that, it's a sort of hodgepodge of development, and only because, and I say that because, this is an area where you would have to go in and invest time and energy to try and buy properties to get these residential units on board, these buildings built. Has the department given any consideration to maybe trying to identify what's private, what's HPD in this whole area to try and come up with a sense of something more comprehensive in terms of residential? Because it really, the buildings really look good. But it's just that you see one, then you see a lot of garbage in between, then you see another, and you see a lot of garbage in between, and it's really unsightly.
I mean, I'm not going to give you a satisfactory answer necessarily, but, that's the nature, I think, of the development that has occurred here in this
Correct.
MX district. It has really taken off. We can get you the exact numbers. It's growing. It's hundreds of new units in some very handsome buildings. It's been an area of interest, continued interest, knowing full well that it's really kind of retro acting a bit to look at the kind of retail services, the kind of urban design, to go back and work with the neighborhood. But that's kind of, it's on our area of interest.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure because it's a great thing that it is happening and that the residential units are coming on board and the buildings are getting built because it is changing the neighborhood. It's actually adding and building the link between Governor Morris houses to the north and Boricua Village and of course everything that's happening in Melrose to the south. So this in between is sort of kind of sloppy looking, but I understand that we're getting to it, so that's appreciated. And if I remember my last question, I'll come back to it later.
Ms. Delausse, and then Ms. Efron.
This might be kind of a follow-up question, and you may or may not know the answer to it. But do you know if this was part of Sobro's Brownfield Opportunity Area state grant that they got to look at former brownfield sites? Are there suspected brownfield sites or actual brownfield sites that might be redeveloped? The reason why I ask is because it actually goes to Commissioner Marin's point about kind of looking at areas in more comprehensively and trying to get a consensus. It's basically a community-based planning process.
I don't know if it's part of that that grant.
I mean, I would just add that I don't believe it's been part of the BOA. Okay. There are brownfields. In fact, the site just to the north here was a brownfield. And it's not been a process. Sobra's focusing on different areas, Eastchester,
Okay. Okay.
Lower Concourse.
Okay. Thanks.
Ms. Efron, and then back to Mr. Marin.
Just along the similar lines, I think I understood that the only occupied buildings are residential. There's no current manufacturing on this site, despite it being an MXN. Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. And the other question is, what is the material of the red? Is that brick, or is there some sort of a painted?
The metal panels. So this is the beige is brick, and the red is brick as well. The orange and the different shades, some of those are metal panels, and as well as there's the glass, which is blue and orange colored metal panels and aluminum storefront type curtain wall.
Great. And finally, I would just say that Urban Pathways sounds like an excellent partner or administrator here.
Mr. Marin.
That's okay. Chairman, thank you. Question answered.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Thank you. Anita?
Yeah.
Could you elaborate, if you could, or perhaps follow up with the level and extent of support services that are going to be present in this complex? We have a blend of formerly homeless along with families, and I'm just interested to know what kind of support services will be present.
So the service provider provided us with a detailed description of what the services would be. They envisage that they will be comprehensive in that all the services would be on site. When the residents first come in, the special needs residents first come into the development, they will be there will be, a plan would be formed for each individual regarding the supportive services. The plan will focus on establishing medical care, money management, medication management, improved ADL and housekeeping skills, relapse prevention and recovery, enhanced socialization, educational and formation of educational and vocational goals, improved insight and judgment relating to understand and coping with the mental illness, and participation in community activities. They would provide, the urban pathways will provide individual case management, daily living skills development.
So there are case managers on site? What
Yes.
kind of staff will be on site?
There will be 3 full-time staff and several visiting consultants. In addition, 3 full-time case managers. There will be a property director, which is part-time, and a deputy executive director, which will be overseeing the work of the service.
And this is all under the auspices of Urban Pathways?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Vinita. Certified.
Thank you.
Let's now move to item number 2, page 83. It's a proposed second renewal of previously approved City Planning Commission special permit to facilitate a mixed-use development in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Our presenter on this item is Richard. This is item number 2, page 83.
Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. This is a post-referral second renewal of a special permit pursuant to ZR Section 1143. This application is for the second 3-year renewal of a special permit for proposed mixed-use development within a permanently discontinued railroad yard on property located at 6200 8th Avenue in the Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn Community District 10. The original application was approved by the City Planning Commission on September 19, 2007, later by the City Council on October 17, 2007. After its initial 4-year term, the first 3-year special permit renewal was approved by the City Planning Commission on October 17, 2011. Since the first renewal, the site has been sold to a new owner. The new owner applicant has filed this application for renewal to retain development rights granted under the special permit for an additional and final 3-year period. By the way of background, in addition to the special permit, the subject of this renewal application, proposed development had a related application, the amendment of the zoning map, changing from M11 and M12 districts to C4-2 and C42A districts. Both applications, the special permit and the rezoning, were approved concurrently by both the City Planning Commission and the City Council back in October of 2007. The property, 6200 8th Avenue, is a through lot generally bounded by the Bay Ridge branch of the Long Island Railroad to the north, as well as a BMT line. 8th Avenue to the east, 7th Avenue to the west, a series of properties to the south, abutting 64th Street in a C4-2 district. The active use of the site as a railroad yard was discontinued in 1966. It was conveyed to the Buckeye Pipeline Company for use as a maintenance facility. In 1989, the pipeline company leased the site to the recent former owner and later sold them the property in 1993. Adjacent to the site, in the south, in the C4-2A district, are 3 properties ranging from 1 to 4 stories. On the corner is a community facility, ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility, and the other 2 buildings are support services to medical offices. To the east, to the west, about a block and a half away is the interchange of the Gowanus Expressway at 65th Street and 6th Avenue. In addition, there's a subway station, the BMT N line, at the corner of 8th Avenue and 62nd Street. The development site fronts both 7th and 8th Avenue. Both are wide streets, 80-foot wide, have traffic in both directions. The site's currently used for off-site parking for the buildings to the south. The special permit would facilitate an 11-story mixed-use development consisting of a large retail store, offices, residences, and accessory parking, with a total of just under 537,000 square feet of floor area. The retail development would occupy the first floor and mezzanine, have just under 100,000 square feet. Offices on the third floor would have just under 61,000 square feet. And the 8 residential floors, floors 4 through 11, would have 216 dwelling units, 20% which are pledged for affordable housing. 3 levels of accessory parking would total 909 spaces and would be provided at the cellar, subcellar, and at the second floor. Just spatially, to understand how the building works, both the retail and the parking is the extent of the whole through lot, with the residential and office portion concentrated on 8th Avenue. The 11-story building would be 125.5 feet in height, setback 10 feet from the street line, and the ground floor retail mezzanine would be approximately 30.5 feet. So the action to facilitate this proposal, the application requests a second renewal of the previously granted and renewed special permit for an additional 3-year term. Section 1143 allows the City Planning Commission to renew a special permit that would automatically lapse after 4 years for up to 2 additional 3-year terms, a total of 10 years, provided the Commission finds the facts upon which the special permit was granted have not substantially changed. The applicant's discussion of the original findings made by the Commission and how they have not substantially changed is attached to your briefing sheet. In addition, as part of their ULURP application, the new owner has supplied a letter to the City Planning Commission reiterating their commitment to prior agreements made during the public review process, namely the provision of 20% of the units for affordable housing, a new traffic signal and other pedestrian improvements, and a post-occupancy traffic study in conjunction with New York City DOT and local community boards. The application was referred to Community Board 10 on October 2nd, 2014, and in a letter dated November 21st to the City Planning Commission, Community Board 10 reported their opposition to the special permit renewal application, with the full board approving their land use committee motion as follows, and I quote, "Motion was made to disapprove this application given the size of the project and overall detrimental impact of the project with respect to density, bulk, traffic congestion, and the lack of appropriateness to the neighborhood scale and character," unquote. In a letter dated December 1st to the Commission, the applicant provides a response, rebuttal, to the Community Board's recommendations, reiterating that the project remains unchanged. The facts upon which the special permit was granted have also not substantially changed. In response to the Community Board's traffic concerns, the applicant procured the services of the original environmental and traffic consultant to do a follow-up analysis, which is also attached to his letter. And though the applicant contends that traffic concerns are unfounded, they reiterated their commitment to address any and all post-construction study traffic issues. They went on to say that in 2007, the full Community Board overruled the Land Use Committee and approved the project, and that the Community Board had no objection to the first renewal. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Delausse.
Hi, Richard, how are you? Happy New Year. Just a question about whether or not there are any more details about the pledge for the 20% of affordable housing. Has that been defined in terms of AMI or bedrooms, things like that? Whether or not they would seek subsidy or whether or not that would be without subsidy. Has any of that been revealed?
Well, originally, the project was a market rate project, and in the public review process, questions were raised about affordability. And the applicant did make that commitment, and it is in the CPC report. However, this is not
Right.
inclusionary district, and there was no restrictive declaration. There was correspondence that's attached to the borough president's report, which talks about how they met at the time with HPD and committed to between 80 and 100 AMI, and they've tried to reiterate that commitment through the letter, including the ULURP application, but that's as far as it's been memorialized in this particular project.
Thank you.
Ms. Levin?
Yes, thank you. Actually, that was one piece of the questions I had here. So I wonder then if, presuming that if we do end up sending a letter to DOB about this renewal, it would be nice to, document as completely as we could their commitment to the affordability. It's not legally binding, but it would be good to put markers about it in as many places as possible. unlikely that DOB would do anything about it, but we ought to do what we can to make the world know that this was a commitment that they made. But Richard, obviously there's a complicated situation with this community board. Some people apparently okay with it, and some people pretty vehemently opposed to it, and I guess the community board votes reflect who showed up at which meetings at which time. But the community board's resolution indicates that the applicant intends to attempt to amend the special permit by going to the BSA.
Okay, well,
What's
that's partially
going on-
correct.
What's going on with that?
What's happening is, as I mentioned, there's a new owner who purchased the site, I think back in May of last year, and it's been widely publicized in local newspapers that he proposes a very different project from what has been approved. And in fact, if you read the committee's report, while they say BSA,
Yeah.
they're misunderstood.
being
It really has to
misunderstood.
would have to come back here.
That was my
Or at the
question.
very least, a
Okay.
major modification, or we believe likely a new application. He did mention that project, I think to the consternation of his attorney, who's present here today. And although they did say, they said, but it's not the subject of our review today.
Okay.
So they know that there's potentially another project, there's a new owner, there's potentially another project that could be coming. This application, however, is to retain the rights under the previous special permit, which he has a right to do, and then moving forward with that.
Okay,
So
and
our
those new
community board
plans
vote-
haven't advanced enough to be changed circumstances that would justify not
The
renewing
project
these
is
permits?
unchanged.
Okay,
The purview of the review is that the project is unchanged and that there hasn't been any substantial change of the conditions, and
good,
the applicant has documented that in your application.
okay, good. And then I note finally that there's a letter from the MTA
Yes.
giving their conditional approval to this renewal, but they have 3 conditions, which I think are the same conditions that were part of the original.
Essentially,
Package.
2 of those conditions are exactly the same as the original approval. The third condition is they have some planned capital improvements at the station, namely ADA improvements, and they're asking the applicant to continue to work with them, which they've consented to,
Okay,
to complete those improvements.
okay.
So
So
they added that to
I
the
trust
letter.
also that DOB will similarly be made aware of these MTA conditions?
Yes, there'll be,
Because some of these relate to,
Design of the building.
yeah, the principal one is that the MTA wants the right to review and approve the plans.
which is the same condition which was in the original approval. If you see the letter, there's a letter, both letters are in your package, and those were sent to the Buildings Department with the original
Good, okay.
approvals and the renewal,
We just want to
so,
be sure we do what we can to be sure that happens,
course.
and that they don't get the permits without the
absolutely.
approval taken, the building permits without that review having taken place.
It's part of the ULIP application, and
Okay,
so you're
good,
apprised of that.
thank you.
Any other questions? So recognizing that the matter before us is really to renew the permit based on no change conditions, but in accordance with Commissioner Levin's request that in an approval letter to DOB, we underscore the commitment on the part of the applicant to provide 20% of the housing as affordable, and also to underscore again the commitment of the applicant to work with the MTA on the building design. I would ask for a show of hands to send an approval letter to DOB for their final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Let's now move to item number 3. It's a Brooklyn pre-hearing application with respect to a proposed zoning map amendment from an R5 and R5C13 district to an R6 district to facilitate a community facility building in Borough Park, Brooklyn. And our presenter is Jonah. This is item number 3, page 141, a Brooklyn pre-hearing application.
First, Happy New Year, and Chair, Commissioners. This is it's an application coming back for a pre-hearing. The applicant, Fort Hamilton LLC, is proposing a zoning map amendment from an R5 to R6 district. An existing C13 overlay, currently mapped over a portion of the rezoning area, would remain unchanged. The proposed rezoning would facilitate the development of a new 6-story community facility building containing ambulatory, diagnostic, and treatment facilities, which includes medical offices and an outpatient birthing center, as well as ground floor retail for that type of use. The proposed new building will have a total of 50,669 square feet of floor area and is located at 5402 Fort Hamilton Parkway in Borough Park, Brooklyn, Community District 12. The proposed project was initiated by a group of physicians affiliated with the Maimonides Medical Center with the purpose of consolidating the women's health services into a single modern state-of-the-art facility serving the needs of the community. The rezoning area is generally bounded by 53rd Street to the north. Let's see here. Fort Hamilton Parkway to the east, and a line 120 feet south of 54th Street, and a line 100 feet west of Fort Hamilton Parkway to the west. Let's see, over here. The area could be characterized as predominantly a low to moderate residential, consisting of 2 to 3 story detached and semi-detached buildings and row houses on the mid-blocks, and then 3 to 4 story apartment buildings on Fort Hamilton Parkway, mapped the combination of R5 and R6. Fort Hamilton Parkway itself is a wide north-south street, predominantly mapped with a C13 overlay, allowing for mixed use of buildings with ground floor retail and residential above. There are several community facilities along Fort Hamilton Parkway, including the Monastery of the Precious Blood, a portion of which is in the project area. You can see this is a photo of the monastery, and this is the location right here. The United Talmudic Academy, which is across the street from the project site, is located over here. And Maimonides Medical Center is 5 blocks to the north on Fort Hamilton Parkway. The proposed project, the development site has a building footprint of 11,000 square feet approximately, and 122 feet of frontage on Fort Hamilton Parkway, and 100 feet of frontage on 54th Street. The building would be built to a total of 4.54 FAR with a total of approximately 50,000 square feet of floor area. The roof of the proposed building will rise to a total height of 6 stories or 66 feet with a 4-story street wall with 44 feet, and then drops to 33 feet at the corners to provide a transition to adjacent buildings. And you can make it out over here. And I'll just, so you can see the roof and then the transition to the neighboring buildings. The proposed building also includes 3 subcellar levels of parking with a total of 150 accessory parking spaces as required by the zoning resolution. Overall, the rezoning would extend the R6 district directly adjacent to north and west, and would bring the existing building located at the monastery into greater compliance. On November 24th of 2014, Community Board 12 recommended to approve the application unanimously with a vote of 33 in favor, 0 opposed, without any conditions. On December 31st of 2014, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams recommended to approve the action with the following conditions: establishing a mechanism that guarantees the height not to exceed 6 stories, allowing local residents and nearby facilities to access and share the parking garage, retaining locally based contractors and NWBE designated establishments, committing to environmentally sustainable practices, and then also requesting that DOT add to restrictive declaration that a post-opening traffic study be conducted, and that if warranted, the DOT allocate funding to improve access to and from the building. The applicant has responded to several of these conditions in a letter attached to the end of the recommendation. In that letter, they state a commitment, they express a commitment to the building's proposed massing, agreed to implement traffic mitigation measures before the building's completion in consultation with DOT, and as well undertake a post-opening traffic study. In addition, the applicant expressed a commitment to a variety of environmentally sustainable practices and make reasonable efforts to hire residents of Brooklyn and contract with WMB establishments. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Ms. Delausse?
I just have a question whether, I mean, it doesn't sound like it from what you just read, but I'm just looking at the rendering from the 54th Street side with the red brick piece that kind of extends out. And there are windows on the side of the building that seem to be very close to the windows of the residential building adjacent to it. I mean, do you know if that was raised at all as a concern considering the way they're facing?
I don't believe so. It wasn't raised by, as far as I'm concerned, from residents.
Okay. Would concern me.
Question for the applicant on Wednesday?
Yeah, we'll ask that Wednesday.
Ms. Levin and Ms. Efron.
Yes, Jonah, thanks for your presentation. I noticed in the Borough President's letter basically an underlying concern about the as-of-right residential development potential that would be created by this rezoning. And this applicant, this owner, has made pretty clear in their letters their commitment to build according to these plans, but we all know that the real estate world changes. And I think it is the case that with the R6 zoning, the building could be maybe twice as tall as what's proposed here if it's built for residential, and I can understand how that would be a local concern. My question, I guess, for the staff is whether, as you're talking about an inclusionary housing text amendment that would provide mandatory inclusionary citywide, would that apply on a site like this?
For a mandatory citywide?
Well, I know that the city is looking at a mandatory inclusionary program.
It might well apply in an R6 zone.
Okay.
No, not, we're looking at applying mandatory inclusionary to all mid-density and high-density districts prospectively.
Right, right.
So this would be certainly a mid-density, not high-density.
Okay, so potentially a site like
residential
this if
district.
it were rezoned.
So if it were
as
rezoned, it would in fact apply.
Okay, because that, in my mind at least, would certainly help mitigate the impact of the height. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Efron?
I understand it's ambulatory, but there is a birthing center attached to this, or as part of it, or at least contemplated. Was there any concern on the community board's part about ambulances, and noting that there's a monastery next door that I presume is an active monastery? Is there any accommodation being made for ambulances and where they would actually come in, or what the regulations would be around sound?
I'd have to double check on the exact type of vehicles that would be, but they do accommodate that on, let's see which show, show another, but there's approximately a 17-foot curb cut on 54th Street. So the width of the curb cut is meant to, but that's actually primarily for visitors parking, and and just to reiterate, the services are designed to be outpatient services, so.
No, I understand that,
Okay,
but it does
yep.
say that the transport to hospitals will be made in the case of need. So presumably, somebody's thinking about having to get people to Maimonides 5 blocks away and how they would arrive. So I'm just questioning whether there's a noise issue. Maybe there isn't, but has it come up at all on the community board?
It hasn't come up, but I'll follow up with the applicants just to see what they're planning. And it also, I don't think it came up as well in the environmental review process, but I'll have to double check that as well.
And the monastery's been notified about this?
Yeah, I believe they're 100%. I have to be absolutely certain, but they're definitely notified. And we've heard from some residents have contacted us where community boards definitely.
Thank you.
Right, okay.
Any other questions for Jonah? Okay, public hearing on Wednesday.
Thanks, Jonah. Let's now move to item number 4, page 154, proposed zoning map amendment to establish a C24 district in the Windsor Terrace neighborhood of Brooklyn. And our presenter is Aileen. This is our second Brooklyn pre-hearing application. Item number 4, page 154.
Hi, Commissioners. The applicant is Lula Enterprises. They're the operator of Hamilton's Restaurant, and they're applying for a zoning map change from R5 to R5 with a C24 overlay. This will facilitate the expansion of the restaurant in the form of an unenclosed sidewalk cafe. The overlay is proposed to be applied on 2 properties at 2806 and 2902 Fort Hamilton Parkway, which are located near the border of Windsor Terrace and Kensington neighborhoods in Brooklyn Community District 7. The area is zoned primarily R5 and is residential in character, with a mix of row houses, semi-detached homes, and larger apartment houses that characterize the neighborhood's side streets. Fort Hamilton Parkway serves as a local retail and access corridor to the local F&G station here, located in the park. The project site also has a community garden to the rear. There are a mix of, there's a gas station, restaurants, laundromats, professional services located along here. There's also a public school, a Brooklyn Public Library branch, a Catholic church, and a charter school located in the vicinity. The project area contains 2 typical 3-story mixed-use buildings. The buildings each contain legal non-conforming commercial uses on the ground floors. There's also, in addition to the restaurant on the subject property, there's also an artist studio, contractor storage, and DSNY storage located to the rear of the restaurant along East 4th Street. In the building across the street, also in the project area, Jaya Yoga East Yoga Studios occupies the ground floor. Both of the buildings have residential uses on the 2 upper floors of the buildings. This action would permit the applicant to proceed with filing an application at the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs for an unenclosed sidewalk cafe license, which is currently inapplicable in the R5 district. No redevelopment to the existing buildings are proposed as part of the application, and no new development at all is anticipated on the property across the street at the yoga studio. C24 districts permit local retail and service uses limited to 1 story if residential uses are located above them. By mapping the C24 overlay and resolving the nonconformance of the commercial uses, they will be able to seek the license from the DCA to expand in the form of an unenclosed sidewalk cafe. Community Board 7 voted unanimously in support of this proposal without comment, and the Borough President recommended approval of the action with the following condition: that the applicant develop the layout of the cafe in consultation with the neighbors. We did ask the applicant about that, and they indicated that tomorrow evening they are having a community meeting where they're going to invite the neighbors to discuss the layout and any other issues related to noise, garbage, smoking, and anything else neighbors might be concerned about. Great. That's all I got.
Questions? Ms. Levin.
So Elaine, thank you. On the layout question, though, that's pretty heavily regulated by the Department of Consumer Affairs, and in our briefing package on page 168, there's a plan that I think probably is consistent with what DCA allows. So I don't know how many choices there are in the layout, but I guess if they're meeting tomorrow night, I hope that someone could explain to us at the public hearing what
Yeah.
the upshot of that discussion was.
I believe, the residential entrance is here,
Yeah?
and the cafe would be in between. So I imagine they just want to make sure their entrance isn't blocked and
Right.
garbage isn't too close. I'm guessing, but, that's something that they can expand on Wednesday.
Okay, and another thing that I'm going to be curious about is I gather from the Brooklyn Borough President's recommendation that in fact, the applicant did have a little sidewalk cafe activity going on here before, that they were serving from picnic tables outside?
They were not, as far as I'm aware, there was a previous occupant that was not this owner that might have had an illegal situation, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
They did have some picnic tables that were outside. They were never used for service.
I see,
and
but
they were
people could take
stacked.
food out there? Oh.
No, it didn't really operate that way. I think they had got them anticipating a sidewalk cafe license, and then they didn't get it, so they never really. But you can ask the applicant to clarify. on
So,
Wednesday.
yeah, so, if the applicant is here, what's on my mind about this is that in some neighborhoods, the idea of having 40 or 45 tables with people eating and drinking and having a nice time out on a nice summer night can create some real quality of life problems.
Right.
And obviously, the community board's concerned about that, too. Sounds like they're going to be talking about that at their meeting tomorrow night. But my question was going to be, if they were using those picnic tables, what was the experience? What issue if there has been, in fact, some activity, legal or not there, what was it like? And what problems arose, and how did they get addressed? And
I'll
maybe
be
there
sure.
wasn't the experience, in which case there's no answer to the question.
Okay, be sure to ask them that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Aline.
Let's now move to item number 5, page 176, proposed city map amendment to eliminate, discontinue, and close Borough between 59th and 60th Streets in Woodside, Queens. And our presenter is Philip. This is a Queens pre-hearing application, item number 5, page 176.
Good afternoon. Returning for pre-hearing review is an application by a private applicant, Firecom Incorporated. The application seeks an amendment to the city map in order to remove the encumbrance caused by the mapped street on the applicant's property and to also acquire from the city a portion of the mapped street. It's in Queens Community District 2. Firecom is a fire safety equipment manufacturer and has been at this location since the 1970s. Their building is located here. Project area is in Woodside neighborhood of Queens, just south of the Long Island Railroad and just north of the MTA number 7 line. The project site is zoned R5B and is a pre-existing non-conforming manufacturing use. Land uses surrounding the project site include a mix of residential, commercial, and manufacturing. The proposed mapping action seeks the elimination, discontinuance, and closing of Bow Road between 59th Street and 60th Street, both of which dead end at the Long Island Railroad. Bow Road is mapped to a width of 50 feet and is not open to traffic. It is enclosed with chain link fencing at both ends. This is the end of 60th Street. This is the 59th Street end. And since the 1980s has functioned as a private parking lot used by the applicant. Ownership of Bow Road is approximately evenly split. The applicant owns the eastern, approximately 6,400 square feet here, and the city owns this western portion, which is approximately 5,400 square feet. Community Board 2 voted 24 in favor, 7 opposed, with 0 abstentions. To approve the application with the condition that a deed restriction would prohibit development of the site and that it remains in use as parking only. And the Borough President issued an approval without conditions.
Questions? No questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
We can have
can't
I'm
have,
going without a question.
you have to have a question.
7 opposed.
Yes.
What
It's,
prompted that?
well, it's my understanding that the members that were opposed to the conditions being applied to the application. So
Good question, Richard.
That's a very rare grounds for community opposition.
That's true.
Well, public hearing on Wednesday.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Philip. Philip also has the next item. We're on item number 6, page 186. Proposed city map amendment to establish Library Lane in the Fordham neighborhood of the Bronx. A Bronx pre-hearing application. Item number 6, page 186.
Also returning for pre-hearing review is an application by the New York City Department of Transportation and the Department of Design and Construction. The application seeks an amendment to the city map in order to facilitate the construction of a new pedestrian corridor, pedestrian connection to the Bronx Public Library and Community District 7. The project area is located in the Fordham neighborhood of the Bronx, approximately 4 blocks west of Fordham University and just east of the Bronx Public Library. Project area, this location is zoned R7B and C4. Land uses surrounding the project site include a mix of residential, commercial, parkland, and vacant property. The proposed mapping action seeks the establishment on the city map of an existing street known as Coles Lane. This is here. It's labeled Library Lane, but it's existing and known as Coles Lane. Coles Lane is open and in use for both vehicle and pedestrian access. The proposed action would also formally change the street name from Coles Lane to Library Lane, which would reflect its potential function as, once improved, as an important pedestrian connection to the Bronx Public Library. In addition to formalizing the street as a mapped city street, the proposed action would allow for the acquisition of a part of a lot that is currently privately owned, but within the proposed mapped street bed. Coles Lane is currently built to a width of approximately 35 feet and functions more like an alley with a single unmarked lane for used by all vehicles. It is not a mapped street, although much of the street is city-owned. The eastern section, Coles Lane here, currently provides access to vehicles and provides access to and from Poe Place, which is a private unmapped drive. The western portion of Coles Lane is limited to pedestrian access via stairs and a sidewalk. The portion of the privately owned lot to be acquired by the city is located here, and it is approximately 1,500 square feet. It currently contains stairs and a landing that provides secondary access to a 5-story multi-unit residential building that is located here. Once the street is mapped, it will be fully redeveloped to provide an ADA-compliant pedestrian corridor with access between Bainbridge Avenue and East Kingsbridge Road and the Bronx Public Library. The proposal calls for the reconstruction of the entire street with a new street bed, sidewalks, curbs, street lighting, street trees, ADA-compliant steps, and ramps, wheelchair ramps. The proposed reconstruction and renaming of Library Lane will upgrade a poorly maintained and unsafe pedestrian passageway to the Bronx Public Library, a vital resource for area residents and students. The committee board voted 22 in favor with 0 against and 0 abstentions to approve the application, and the Borough President's office also issued a recommendation for approval.
Questions? Hearing none? Even from Richard? Public hearing Wednesday.
Thanks, Philip. Let's now move to item number 7, page 207, a Manhattan pre-hearing application with respect to a proposed special bulk permit to facilitate the retention of an existing structure within a single-family home on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And our presenter is Stephen. We're at item number 7, page 207.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by 110 Residence LLC for the property located at 110 East 70th Street for a special permit pursuant to zoning resolution section 74-711, landmark preservation in all districts, to modify bulk regulations applicable to a single-family home on portions of an existing rear yard extension that was created in 1995 for a then permitted community facility use. The applicant seeks 3 waivers. First, to permit retention of an existing structure in a required rear yard. Second, to permit retention of existing outer court that does not meet minimum required width. And finally, requirements for maximum lot coverage. This project was certified on September 29th, 2014, is coming back for pre-hearing review. I'll take you through an abbreviated overview of the project and then go to the committee board and borough president recommendations. So the project area, the building is in Community District 8 in the Upper East Side Historic District at 110 East 70th Street between Park Avenue and Lexington Avenue in an R8B zoning district within the Limited Height District 1A. West of the project site, Park Avenue is a R10 district with a maximum permitted floor area ratio of 10 for residential and community facilities. East of the project site is an R8B district, which continues to a point 100 feet west of Lexington Avenue, where an R9X district is mapped, which has a permitted FAR of 9 for residential and community facilities. The site plan is in the middle. The photo board is here. The building is located mid-block on 70th Street on the south side with a zoning lot frontage of 19 feet and 10 inches and a depth of 100 feet 5 inches for a total lot area of 1,991 square feet. The building contains a total of 7,536 square feet of zoning floor area within an FAR of 3.78 with a maximum permitted residential FAR in an R8B district of 4. The building is 5.5 stories, including a basement, a cellar, and a subcellar. The 5.5-story portion is at the street line, right here. And the 3.5-story portion is in the rear, which consists of a rear yard extension measuring 12 feet 4 inches by 10 feet 8 inches, constituting approximately 130 square feet. The building rises to the maximum permitted height of 60 feet. The maximum permitted lot coverage in an R8B zone is 70%, and the building has a lot coverage of 84%. And that figure has not changed since the current owners bought and renovated portions of the site. Now, as you may recall, the history of this site is a little, shall we say, complicated, but the quick of it is that the building was completed in 1869 as a single-family home. It underwent multiple alterations that enlarged the rear extension in 1905 and 1922, and with the final rear yard extension being in 1995, which was permitted in the zoning resolution at that time for a community facility use. It has been a community facility use since an application in 1954 was filed to change the legal occupancy of the building's basement, including the rear yard extension, into a doctor's office. Now, the applicant bought the site in 2007 and in 2008 filed for and completed a comprehensive renovation of the building, including all of the rear yard extension. Now, these actions were approved by Landmarks Preservation Commission and the Department of Buildings. Subsequently, Department of Buildings recharacterized the building. The portion in question is the 1995, which I'll point you right here. It's this section here. That 130 square feet was part of the question for the recharacterization. So in order for the applicant is coming to City Planning Commission to legalize the non-compliant portion of the 1995 rear yard extension, which is the 130 square feet. The rear yard extension was completely rebuilt within the same footprint, within the same envelope as existed from the 1995 alteration. The special permit would not have any new development, and without the special permit, the owners would have to remove the 130 square feet. Now to the waiver. Okay. So as I mentioned, the applicant is seeking 3 waivers pursuant to 74-711 to facilitate the project. The first waiver is for the minimum required rear yard. Section 2347 requires that a rear yard with a depth of not less than 30 feet be provided at the rear lot line on the property. A rear yard of only 1 foot is provided because the 1922 extension and the 1995 extension occupies all but the last 1 foot, 2 inches of the rear yard, which is right here. The second waiver is for minimum narrow outer court width. The 1995 rear yard extension is separated from the 1-story basement and masonry extension by a narrow outer court, less than 30 feet wide at the basement level, beyond the 30-foot rear yard line. Section 23841 provides that a narrow court's width must be at least 1 1/3 its depth. The court has a depth which is slightly less than needed, thus a waiver is needed for 7 5/8 inches, by which the outer court's width does not meet the minimum required. That's the yellow highlighted area here. Highlight, so you can see it. And finally, the third waiver. The maximum lot coverage for interior lots is R8B districts is 70%. With the 1995 rear yard extension, the lot coverage of the property is 84%. However, as the 1995 rear yard extension and mechanical space under the stairs is only 144 square feet, without it, the lot coverage of the property would be 76.5%, which is illegally non-compliance, existing legal non-compliance, because it's pre-1961. So on to the Community Board and Borough President Review. On October 9th, 2014, Manhattan Community Board 8 approved the application with a vote of 34-2, with 2 abstentions and no conditions. On November 24, 2014, the Borough President also approved the application and noted in reference to rear yard obstructions that care needs to be taken for granting waivers upon a cumulative adverse condition that may already exist.
Thank you, Stephen.
Sure.
Any questions? Ms. Levin?
Well, just so that we're fully prepared for Wednesday. Were there speakers in opposition at the community board's public hearing? And if so, what's the core of the argument, if any, in opposition to this?
At the community board hearing, there was no people speaking, nobody spoke out against the project. There was a couple members who felt they needed more time to understand the application. It's a pretty complicated package, and I think there was confusion as to why some of these things happened. So I think they just wanted more time to review it. Though I think that's why there was some 2 opposed and 2 abstentions.
Okay. So do we anticipate speakers in opposition on Wednesday? You don't know?
I do not think so. I checked, and they said they don't anticipate any neighbors or anyone showing up to speak in opposition.
Okay. Thank you.
I know you were hoping for more, but it's a very expensive application on a square foot basis.
Very. Very.
Any other questions for Stephen? Ms. Efron?
I should say, even though it's mid-block, it is the first of the townhouses next to the apartment building. So even if one was very concerned about the donut, it's the edge of the larger block, which is quite a beautiful block. Right.
Right.
I mean, so
Well, there's
it's
a-
not really mid-block. It's
Right.
sort of the first of the townhouses.
There's a large apartment building here, 19 stories high, and there's an open lot here.
Which is part of the apartment house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't really a question, sorry, Chairman.
It was an observation. Thank you very much, Stephen. So we're going to have a very quiet public hearing on Wednesday on this.
Hope so.
That library way.
Let's now move to item number 8, page 243. Proposed special use and bulk permits to facilitate a mixed-use building in the Ladies Mile Historic District of Manhattan. It's also a Manhattan pre-hearing application. We're on item number 8, page 243, and our presenter is Richard.
Good afternoon. This is a private application for a special permit pursuant to Sections 1345 and 13451, and a special permit pursuant to Section 74712 of the zoning resolution to facilitate the construction of a new 185-foot, 300-unit residential building with 200 public parking spaces at 7 West 21st Street. A bulk special permit is requested to modify provisions for front and rear wall setbacks and permitted obstructions within a rear yard. And a parking special permit is requested to allow 200 public parking spaces on site, which is not permitted as of right in the Manhattan core. This application is returning for a public hearing following review by Manhattan Community Board 5 and the Manhattan Borough President. 7 West 21st Street is an existing surface parking lot shown here in gray, with frontages on both West 22nd Street and West 21st Street in the Flatiron neighborhood of Midtown. It's located just southwest of Madison Square Park in the iconic Flatiron Building, and it's also located in the Ladies Mile Historic District, which was designated by the LPC in 1989. The site is a through lot extending about 198 feet between both streets and has about 137 feet of frontage on West 22nd Street and 106 feet of frontage on West 21st Street. The existing 256-space public parking lot has entrances on both the West 21st and West 22nd Streets, and there are 3 curb cuts on West 22nd Street and 2 on West 21st Street, but only 1 curb cut on each street is actually used by the facility. The site is located within a C64A zoning district, which allows, on a narrow street, a minimum base height of 60 feet and a maximum base height of 125 feet, after which the front wall must set back 15 feet before rising to an overall maximum building height of 185 feet. The base FAR for all uses is 10, increasable up to 12 through the inclusionary housing program. In 2004, the area was rezoned from an M16M district to a C64A district as part of the Ladies Mile rezoning, which also involved provisions for added flexibility for buildings located within the historic district to better match the base height or location of street walls of adjacent buildings without requiring a bulk special permit. Also in 2004, the site received a special permit for a 363-space attended underground parking garage, as well as renewals in 2008 and 2012, but because the applicant was unable to begin construction, the permit is lapsed. This is a quick look at the West 21st Street and the West 22nd Street frontages, and I'll explain the building program in a second. The applicant proposes to replace the existing parking lot with a new mixed-use building containing 300 residential units, 60 of which will be affordable, approximately 8,000 square feet of ground floor retail, and 200 public parking spaces in the cellar and sub-cellar levels. The building will contain 2 residential wings. Look at the building here is 21st Street and West 22nd Street, and there's the south wing and the north wing, each of which will rise to 185 feet without any setback. A 60-foot rear yard between the 2 wings with a glass atrium shown here in red, connecting the first floor and lobby areas to the second floor resident amenities in the south wing. Entrances to both the retail and residential portions will be available on both West 21st and West 22nd Streets, and the 2 curb cuts on West 21st Street will be consolidated into 1 13-foot curb cut. So here, this is a plan, the ground floor. Previously, there were 3 curb cuts, 3 curb cuts on West 22nd Street. 2 on West 21st Street consolidated into 1 13-foot curb cut here. And there were 3 curb cuts on West 22nd Street to be consolidated into 1 21-foot curb cut. Instead of locating the garage vents above the entrances of the building facade, the applicant proposes to locate the vents within a sunken garden within the rear yard, shown here in plan in red, these 2 squares here, and these 2 squares here in section, and have them flush with planting so that they are shielded from direct view. The development would have an overall FAR of 11.63, which will be made possible through a bonus from the inclusionary housing program. In order to facilitate the proposed development, 2 special permits are requested. The first is a special permit pursuant to sections 1345 and 13451A to allow 200-space public parking garage within the cellar and sub-cellar levels of the building, which is not allowed as of right in the Manhattan core. And the second is to a special permit pursuant to section 74712B to allow the front building walls along West 21st and West 22nd Street to rise to 185 feet without the required 15-foot setback above 150 feet. That's area shown in orange here in section and here in plan. To allow the rear building walls to rise to 154.5 feet instead of 150 feet before setting back 10 feet. That's the area shown in green here in section and also in plan. And to allow vents for the proposed parking garage and a glass atrium within the required rear yard, which are not permitted obstructions, also shown in red here in plan, section and plan. On November 13th, the Manhattan Community Board 5 issued a resolution voted to issue a resolution by a vote of 36-3 with one abstention, recommending approval of the application for both special permits without conditions. On December 17th, the Manhattan Borough President issued a recommendation for disapproval of the application unless, and there are 4 conditions listed. The first is that the approved parking plans are revised to show the location of 6 electric car charging stations to ensure that they are accessible, and the inclusion of 10 car share spaces. The second is that a written commitment is made that the regulatory agreement will reflect A, the equal distribution of the affordable units throughout both building segments, B, that such distribution will occur at all levels up to 85% of the total heights of the building, C, that there's a comparable quality of fixtures and furnishings for the affordable units, and D, that all amenities such as the children's room, gym, lounge, game room, and the rooftop recreational area will be accessible to all tenants, and that the rates for such, if applicable, will be prorated to be affordable to all tenants. The third condition is that the regulatory agreement will include language to ensure that even if the amenities are changed in the future, that all amenities will remain affordable to all occupants. And the fourth is that the approved waiver plans will be revised to include a note saying that the atrium roof will be a green roof, and that a note is added clarifying that the green roofs on the atrium and the 21st Street segments will be vegetated roofs, and that they would meet the requirements of the most current version of the LEED rating system of the United States Green Building Council. I should note for reference, in regard to the comments on the distribution of affordable units, the applicant has indicated that 56% of the affordable units, or 34, will be located within the north wing, and 44%, or 26 units, will be located within the south wing. Section 2396B of the zoning resolution only requires that 60 of the affordable units be spread across 65% of the floors. In the north wing, they will be spread across 75% of the floors, and the south wing across 80% of the floors. The applicant notes that this difference in distribution among the two wings is partially due to fewer floors dedicated to residential units in the south wing, one of which, the second floor, is dedicated entirely to residential amenities. The applicant and the representatives will be present at the public hearing on Wednesday to answer any of the questions or concerns you may have. Thanks.
Questions? Ms. Efron.
Does the department have any ideas for the future about electric car stations and car share? Is that part of any current parking text?
As far as I understand, no. We recently did issue the Manhattan Core Parking Text Amendment, which took a comprehensive look at parking in Manhattan Core. Anyone could provide the charging stations as of right. They're not required to be shown on plans. I think Stephen would like to step in and say something.
Thank you.
We did the car share text amendment a few years ago, which allowed commercial vehicles, car share vehicles to be parked in private residential accessory facilities. So that was the main thing that we've done to focus on car share. Our green zone text amendment also had some provisions for electric car vehicles, allowing, because you need to have the infrastructure put in in order to charge them up, because it takes all the drains. You have to have the right kind of batteries and plugins. So that's what we've done at city planning in the past couple of years.
Okay, so this is something the department would look favorably upon?
Well, we particularly for the car share aspect of it, we particularly did not make any requirements in the car share zoning text amendment and putting car share vehicles into the zoning text amendment, requiring them at parking facilities, because we felt you couldn't force a company to put their vehicles in there if they didn't want to. So we said, let's make it as easy as possible for Hertz, Zipcar, whoever to get in there, make it kosher for everybody, for those companies to get in, but we didn't want to make any requirements for those. But we also are looking at, in the Manhattan Core parking, we have some provisions about looking at ways in large-scale developments, ways to mitigate vehicles coming in, driving in. So we have been looking at it, and we feel we've addressed it sufficiently at this point.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if there's sort of a tension between trying to have a greener city and the mayor's plans for lower emissions over time and a special permit for additional parking. And it just seems as if both car shares and the electric stations somehow reconcile those two a little bit.
Something to look at, I think. I mean, it may not, as I understand what Stephen or Richard, I don't remember which one, said about the power stations, that they do require certain infrastructure that may not always be present, so, but I think it is something to look at for the future.
Thank you.
Ms. Delos?
Hi, I'm just, should we expect the applicant to be able to speak to the borough president's concerns? Are we going to get any other, are we expecting any other correspondence before Wednesday, or are we just expecting them to?
They'll be here on Wednesday to address those.
Okay, great.
Any other questions? Thank you, Richard.
Let's now go to item number 9, page 375, proposed special use permit to facilitate residential development, Soho neighborhood of Manhattan at 498 Broome Street. And our presenter is Edwin. It's also a Manhattan pre-hearing application. We're on item number 9, page 375.
Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Happy New Year to you all. The applicant seeks the grant of a special permit pursuant to Section 74-711 of the zoning resolution to develop residential use at 498 Broome Street. The project site is located within Soho, within Manhattan Community District 2. The requested action would facilitate the conversion of the 2nd through 6th floors of the subject building to residential use. The cellar and ground floor would contain use group 6 retail use. 498 Broome Street is located on the north side of Broome Street between Worcester and West Broadway. This is a photograph of the existing built condition. This is 498 Broome Street, located right here. The project site comprises an existing 5-story building with a 6th-floor penthouse. You can see the penthouse right over here. The building has 20 feet of frontage on Broome Street and a lot depth of 75 feet. The site has 1,500 square feet of lot area. This building has been vacant for approximately 3 years. The cellar and first floor were previously occupied by use group 6 retail uses. The upper floors were used as an artist studio by the former owner, but were not officially listed as joint living work quarters for artist space or units. The project site, in terms of zoning, is located within an M15A zoning district. Use Group 2, which is residential uses, are not permitted as of right, such the need for this special permit. In M15A zoning districts, Use Group 6 retail uses are permitted in buildings occupying less than 3,600 square feet of lot area. The site has 1,500 square feet of lot area. In terms of the proposed build program, the requested action would allow the 2nd through 6th floors to be used for residential use. The building's ground and cellar floors would be used for retail use, which are use group 6. There are no joint living work quarter artist units within this building. This is the building in section. The ground floor would contain use group 6 retail space, which is allowed as of right in this district. The 2nd floor, 3rd floor, 4th floor, 5th floor, and 6th floor penthouse would have residential use. The 2nd floor, 3rd floor, and 4th floor would each have simplex units. The 5th and 6th floor would comprise a duplex unit. In total, this building would have 4 residential units. The application includes a report from the Landmarks Preservation Commission stating that a continuing maintenance program has been established that would result in the preservation of 498 Broome Street, and that the proposed use modification contributes to a preservation purpose. The special permit requires that the proposed use modifications have a minimal adverse impact or effect on conforming uses within the building and in the surrounding area. I also want to note that there will be separate entrances for both the retail space as well as the residential use. This is the ground floor plan. The retail space is accessed through here. The ground floor space would have about 1,100 square feet of retail space. The residential units are accessed here, and you can either take an elevator or you can take the stairs up to the 4 residential units on the upper floors. On September 29, 2014, this application was certified as complete and referred to Community Board 2 and the Borough President for review and comment. On November 20th, 2014, Community Board 2, by a vote of 49 in favor, none opposed, and none abstaining, adopted a resolution to approve this application with the condition that one unit be preserved as a joint living work quarter for artist unit or an artist studio. The board believes that GLWQA units are a form of affordable housing that should be preserved in Soho. On December 22, 2014, the Borough President adopted a resolution to conditionally approve this project contingent on the applicant doing the following, and I'm going to quote from the Borough President's recommendation. Condition number 1, maintaining a joint living work quarters for artist unit in the building or providing some form of a studio, work, or show space for artists in the building. This basically supports and complements what the Community Board stated in their recommendation. Condition number 2, demonstrated that all necessary building permits were appropriately applied for and obtained. The Borough President, in her recommendation, stated that they could not find a permit for the penthouse. There's permits on file for the alteration of the building on floors cellar through the 5th floor, but not for the penthouse. I checked the DOB website. I found the alteration drawings for floors cellar through 5, but I didn't find anything for the penthouse, so the applicant can speak to that at the public hearing. The third condition, clarifying the requirements of the LPC Certificate of Appropriateness regarding the exterior materials on the penthouse and making any necessary changes. In the LPC Certificate of Appropriateness, it says that the penthouse can be clad in either a beige stucco or in brick to complement what's happening in the lower part of the building, as seen in the photograph right here. The applicant can clarify that on Wednesday. And lastly, reviewing the application with CPC to ensure its accuracy. The Borough President, in her review, found a discrepancy with the building floor area. We checked the drawings and found that to be the case, so we asked the applicant to file a revised drawing with the correct building floor area, which is 7,450 square feet. Those documents were filed this past Wednesday.
Thank you. Questions for Edwin? Ms. Levin.
First, I want to just be sure I understand correctly. This is an enlargement of a building in Soho, but it doesn't need a permit because it's not enlargement of a joint live work quarters for artist space?
The enlargement is an as-of-right enlargement, so it doesn't require a special permit from us.
So what contrasts it with the Green Street application that we're going to discuss in follow-up is that that one was not an as-of-right enlargement.
I'm not familiar with that application.
Okay.
But I can.
Okay, but this is an as-of-right.
The enlargement is as-of-right.
Okay.
However, the residential use is not, and that's what requires the special permit.
Okay. Can you confirm that none of this space is occupied?
I can confirm that, yes, because I was there this past weekend and I saw that the building's still vacant.
Okay.
From the outside, looking from the outside.
Then it does seem to me that this application also raises the same package of questions that are applicable to the Green Street application, and I see that that's on our agenda for discussion later on in this meeting for follow-up, so maybe we'll save that for the same thing, but I hope that whoever the applicant's representative is on Wednesday is prepared perhaps to engage in a conversation about Soho zoning in general, because this is one more in a recent string of applications for residential use.
Yes. I mean, it's if not a carbon copy, it's very, very similar to Green Street. Mr. Eady.
Yeah, just want to understand, reading the community board's recommendations, they seem to be under the impression that there's joint living space in the building currently, and I thought I understood that that was not the case.
That's correct, the building is vacant.
Oh, okay, it's vacant.
Building's vacant now.
But had there been any officially or
There was,
registered?
the previous owner 3 years ago used the upper floors as an artist studio, but it wasn't officially joint. It wasn't registered, that's
So,
correct.
To the degree that they say that it would result in a loss, there never was a registered joint living.
Registered, that's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
As far as we know, in the last several years. Any other questions for Edwin? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you've been waiting anxiously for the next item. Manhattan pre-application with respect to proposed notice of intent to acquire office space for the Department of City Planning and the City Planning Commission. Hearings going forward.
I expect everyone to adopt the same detailed scrutiny to this as you do to everything else that's before you.
Where is that arcade?
So this is a Manhattan pre-hearing application. Our presenter is Richard. Commissioner Edie, I'm sorry.
All right. You excited?
Staff is up.
This is an application by the Department of Citywide Administrative Services for a notice of intent to acquire approximately 120,000 square feet of office space at 120 Broadway for use by the Department of City Planning. This notice of intent involves the consolidation and relocation of DCP's current offices at 22 Reed Street and 2 Lafayette Street, as well as relocation of the public meeting space used by the City Planning Commission for public hearings at 22 Reed Street. 120 Broadway is an existing 38-story, 1.8 million square foot commercial office building occupying the full block here, bounded by Broadway, Cedar Street, Nassau Street, and Pine Street in Community District 1 of Manhattan. It is located in the C55 zoning district in the Special Lower Manhattan District. Constructed in 1915, the building is both a New York City designated landmark and a National Historic Landmark, and its 550-foot sheer walls, without regard for light and air, prompted the development and adoption of the city's first zoning resolution in 1916, the first to be adopted by any city in the United States. I think the irony of the move is impossible to ignore, but this is your show. I'll let you guys have fun with it. Nearby buildings are predominantly used for offices, with most, if not all, buildings containing...
Point out it was one of the most hated buildings in New York, and today it's a landmark, but...
We're here today. But the area has seen a number of new residential developments and conversions, particularly around Wall and Fulton Streets. The building is within walking distance, so it's building within walking distance of Trinity Church, right across the street, the World Trade Center site, Battery Park, which is just off the map, and City Hall Park, which is also just off the map. The building is also well served by transportation, with immediate access to the 4-5 J and Z trains. So here's the building here. Here's the 4-5 and the JZ trains, which are accessible right in the lower arcade of the building. It's also near the NR, the 1, the AC at Fulton Transit Center, and the 2-3 at William Street, and also the M5 bus along Broadway. The building is currently used for offices on all floors, with 2 banks, a restaurant, a cafe, and a convenience store on the ground floor. Other tenants include the Attorney General's Office, the Alliance for Downtown New York, ALM Media, Buyer Blinder Bell, and many others. The building's principal entrance is located on Broadway, although entrances are also located on Cedar and Nassau Streets. So here's Broadway, Cedar, and Nassau Streets. ADA access is made available via the Cedar Street entrance, where a security guard will take the visitor to a service elevator providing access to all floors. The Department of City Planning currently occupies approximately 99,000 square feet of office space at 22 Reed Street and approximately 15,000 square feet of space at 2 Lafayette Street. The department also has offices in each of the boroughs for the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island planning staff. Those staff will remain in their current locations. Together, the department has a staff of approximately 300, including full and part-time interns, and also on the ground floor of 22 Reed Street is a public meeting space, which seats approximately 60 people and can accommodate an additional 50 people in the lobby overflow space. The public hearing space is used both by the City Planning Commission and the Board of Standards and Appeals for the review sessions and public hearings. Visitors to 22 Reed Street include members of the public, applicants, attorneys, architects, members of city agencies, and others doing business with city planning. CPC review sessions are typically held every other Monday, and public hearings are typically held every other Wednesday. On Mondays and Tuesdays, when the CPC is not in session, the BSA typically holds its review sessions and public hearings in the same space. The number of attendees varies depending on the agenda items, but can be as few as 20 to as many as 400. Due to ongoing maintenance issues, inferior meeting spaces, an antiquated and substandard layout, and a public hearing space that is inadequate in size and lacking appropriate lighting and sound, the Department of City Planning intends to consolidate and relocate its Manhattan offices to 120 Broadway. The department would occupy the entirety of the 30th and 31st floors and a portion of the lower arcade for a total of approximately 120,000 square feet of space. The 30th and 31st floors will be fully occupied by city planning staff, including members of the City Planning Commission. The lower arcade space will be used as the Commission's public hearing space, which will be accessible by the general public and would not require a security check, making this building uniquely appealing for public meetings. The 30th and 31st floors were previously occupied by an insurance company, and the lower arcade space was previously occupied by the American Arbitration Association, both of which are in the process of relocating, but all spaces are mostly vacant. The proposed office space will be of sufficient size to meet the current and future needs of the Department of City Planning. The space will be predominantly retained in its existing condition, but will require selected renovation to make it suitable for the department's needs. Just very briefly, have a look at the ground floor. If you're curious about how we're going to get into the building and get into the lower arcade space. There's Broadway, Cedar Street, Nassau, and Pine Street. Most visitors and staff will enter via Broadway, where a staircase will take you directly to the lower arcade. The brown here shows the security area, so staff would go here to get upstairs, but the general public could access the lower arcade directly from the lower arcade, from the ground floor, or from the lower arcade when you get off the JZ or the 4-5. For ADA access, visitors would come to Cedar Street, where a security guard ring a bell. The security guard would then come, bring the visitor through, and access one of the 2 service elevators, which accesses all floors upstairs and also the lower arcade downstairs. DCAS will be present at the public hearing on Wednesday to answer any of the questions. That's it.
Richard, you really did that with some enthusiasm. So,
Someone's got to bring it.
so it's questions. Mr. Knuckles.
Thank you. Richard, you left out a critical and I think pivotal piece of information, and that is where our spacious offices will be located in 120 Broadway.
It will be upstairs with the staff.
Well, could we see them? I mean, what will they look like?
Oh, DCAS can take
You
you
have
there.
renderings, or
I can draw one for you.
will each of us have our own private restroom, which is what I've been hoping for many years now?
We can put that in the report. It's the only way it can happen.
Any other questions? Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, how are you? I have a question about the ADA compliance. You know, it seems less than ideal for folks to have to go around the side and ring a buzzer when, you know, most people are entering through the main entrance. I wondered if that issue had come up, or, you know, because it certainly is a concern.
My understanding is that because this is a landmark building, the entrances to the elevators are just too shy to accommodate a wheelchair. Some wheelchairs may fit, but I think per ADA standards, most of them are not, except for these 2 freight elevators here.
Okay.
Doing our best.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Levin.
I guess my question is, how soon? And that's the other important question, in addition to knowing where the private bathrooms are. And then, related but not part of this application, should we anticipate a future ULURP application for 22 Reed Street? You know, we approved one, Commission approved a disposition a couple years ago, but that didn't make it through the City Council.
Right.
I think the first question, I think it's up to the chairman to let us know when we're moving.
Okay.
And the second is, I think that question should go to DCAS on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
I would say this, hopefully this is on a very fast track, partly because of the, not only our desire, but part of the landlord's desire to move this as quickly as possible, because there is an existing, as Richard indicated, an existing tenant and lease that's expiring, so it's a very critical on the landlord's part. I will also say that the search for the space throughout Lower Manhattan was conducted by DCAS, and obviously DCAS has been the project manager of this, but as Richard indicated, this really in many ways is unique because of the security arrangements here, and those of you who have been in this building know that you can access the sub-level where the hearing room potentially will be from either the Broadway side or from the Nassau Street side without going through security, so it's particularly appropriate for the public. And there are public agencies in there already, including the Attorney General's office. Any other questions? So DCAS will be here on Wednesday. Thank you, Richard.
Great, thanks.
Okay. So on Wednesday, January 7th, members of staff have prepared favorable resolutions for the following: the South Shore Business Improvement District and 187 Nevada Avenue, which is the proposed certification within the special Staten Island Special Natural Area District, and no authorization or special permit is needed to facilitate enlargement to a single-family home. That's on for Wednesday's vote. And then on January 21st, pending the commission's concurrence, staff will prepare favorable resolutions for the following. We have the Meatpacking Area Business Improvement District, the Hudson Yards Sliver Text Amendment concerning height modifications in the Hudson Yards Special District subareas D4 and D5, and 102 Green Street, which involve use in bulk special permits to facilitate residential development. Comments?
I think when we left this off at the last review session, we had identified a number of issues connected with this application, and maybe not so much with the application individually, but with the issues that it has provoked concerning the Soho rezoning. And I'm wondering if the staff has given any further thought, has any further direction for us about where we might go with this. Obviously, 498 Broome Street presents many of the similar issues, and I think I made my little speech last time, so I won't repeat it in detail. I'm persuaded that the immediate past has included a sufficient number of these applications to allow use group 2 use, that it would be inappropriate for us to abruptly change that course, particularly for applicants who have applications already certified in public review, because it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort, we know, to get to the point of certification. But I'm also troubled by the notion that we would essentially be changing the zoning by special permit without giving the public more, or us as a commission. I mean, there are some notions embedded in the existing zoning that support arts uses in Soho, and I don't think we should let those go sort of as of right. And I think it's important that our report, whatever we come up with in this application, send some signals to future applicants about what our attitude will be toward future similar applications.
Let me briefly respond on behalf of the staff, and Edith and Eric can add to what I say. But I think the staff inclination is to agree with you and your perspective, to agree on that course of action that we have, looking back on what the commission has done over the last several years, has been mostly, if not a clear pattern of approving these applications. And it would be, I think, troubling to change that in midstream when the applicant community has come to expect that. At the same time, we recognize, by not only by these applications, but by several others that have come before us, the complexities of Soho zoning, and that it really does require a review of a more comprehensive review, and so the staff will undertake that review. I think that right now we have an enormous amount on our plate, so exactly when we undertake it, I don't think we can quite commit to yet, but clearly it is something we will undertake, and recognizing that this is a complex area, but where I think while everyone may not immediately agree on the appropriate solutions here and best approach, I do think that there is a consensus that this review really has to be undertaken by, and a consensus in all quarters, that this is a review that has to be undertaken and that that's shared by the community as well as, I think, by all of us. So I don't know if Edith or Eric want to add to that, but I do think that's a task we have to undertake.
Thank you for that. But I'm mindful of the fact that this review is going to take way longer than any of us would like to have it take, and I understand why it has to take that long, but that's just the way that the nature of these things work. In the meantime, we're going to continue to get these applications. And, in the ideal world, I would like to see, an informal additional finding to these applications being the way in which an application supports the continued identity of this neighborhood with the arts. I think it's a reality that is what many consider this neighborhood to be. I think we know that that reality may not, that perception may not in fact match the reality, but the real estate market identifies it with the arts, the tourist market identifies it with the arts. All kinds of reasons it's important, and the fact that the artist moved into this neighborhood in the first place helped create it. That's not heritage that we should give up quickly. I'm not prepared to insist that we have, 20% joint live work space, but I do think that if an applicant comes before us with an application that includes some feature that continues to support the arts in this area, I will be more favorably disposed to it, even though it's not a legal requirement.
Ms. Stella Uzda, Ms. Efron.
So Chair, first I just want to say I think I'm glad to hear that whenever the review happens that it's going to happen. I think that's helpful. And I think, and this is probably one of the things that was going to be on the list of things to review anyway, but just in reading the recent applications and looking at how JLWQA is synonymous in so many people's minds with affordable housing, I think that could be a slippery slope. Obviously, there's a real clear definition of what affordable housing is, and those kinds of income requirements are not imposed on JLWQA, yet I understand how that is something that is contributing to below-market opportunities for artists in the neighborhood, and so I would just ask that as part of the review that's something that's looked into very closely, what the incomes are of the JLWQA registrants, and what affordable housing under what government would consider affordable housing exists in the neighborhood, so that we can kind of have clear definitions when we're talking about what these goals are related to artists and affordability and where the two overlap. I think that would be very, very helpful as part of the review.
I think those are excellent suggestions. I would also hope that as part of the review, the Department of Cultural Affairs is consulted. And I will just add that I am a little bit troubled by the idea that because no artists applied for the housing, it therefore proved there wasn't a market. This is a community, the real estate development community, that has very good ways of marketing its space for prospective tenants or owners, and it just strikes me as in other cases where that's been used as an excuse to not attract tenants for whom the space could be readily available, and I just think we as a city can do better.
Thank you. Ms. Ortiz.
I'd also like to, agree with Commissioner Levin and Commissioner De La Hoz. I think they raised some important points, and I would add to that, the challenge of suggesting there's a linkage between JLWQA and affordability is sort of at the core of this issue. And one of the challenges that we are considered, my recollection is that there's no mechanism to really manage affordability in these very small buildings. And so, if we're going to be looking at how we ensure there's affordability, and recognizing there's a lot of development that occurs in small buildings, we should consider ways in which we can, ensure compliance over time so that we can actually offer units that are affordable.
Thank you. Other comments? I'll just say that I think, appreciate all the comments on this very complex issue, and there are also many other issues with respect to Soho zoning that have proved nettlesome over the last few years that we should take into account as well. I'd say two things. One, that by the very comments and observations and questions that you raise, clearly can see that there is a little, more than a little bit of research that we have to do with respect to who's living in Soho now, what their status is, what the nature of the arts community and artists are with respect to affordability, the need to work closely with the Department of Cultural Affairs on these issues, and also the reality with respect to smaller buildings that it's in part a issue of do we extend affordability requirements to smaller buildings, recognizing, well, with the foreknowledge that this is a very difficult for HPD to monitor, because ultimately HPD is the agent that has to monitor compliance, and there's a degree of scale and that has to be taken into account. So if there's a way to do that, and it obviously extends far beyond Soho and this neighborhood, but it's an issue that we have to struggle with, and especially as we are especially sensitive to affordable housing. So,
I would just clarify, we're talking about, or I would want to clarify, have clarified, we're talking about affordable housing for artists.
I think,
Are we?
no, I think we're
As
talking.
opposed to affordability or artists. I mean, I think we have to.
I think we're talking
Clarify.
at least more generally right now about taking a more comprehensive look at Soho zoning.
Right.
I think there's several issues let me say, several issues that you've all raised. One is the need to take a comprehensive look at Soho zoning, which goes beyond artists or certified artists or even housing, because it affects some of the ground floor use issues as well. That's one issue. The second issue that's been raised is the relationship between artists and affordable housing, and that also that's beyond a Soho issue to some extent. I mean, there's should we be as a matter of policy reserving a certain amount of affordable housing for artists, or for certified artists, or for artists more generally? And that's leaving aside the very complicated and what has been at the very least, a very difficult issue of even defining who an artist is, which is a whole other issue. And then the issue of extending affordability or affordability requirements to smaller buildings generally, which these issues all overlap to some extent, but they're in a certain way they're separate issues too.
All right, well. Definitely have to clarify.
On that comprehensive note, you can see the Manhattan office looking askance at this.
Like 12 interns of y'all.
Their workload has just increased enormously. Is there anything else before us?
Yes, we just have two additional actions. Landmarks Preservation Commission has designated Hawthorne Court Apartments in Queens as a landmark. Staff is unaware of any conflicts with the zoning resolution. Projected public improvements. We'll be preparing a favorable report in that regard. And last but not least, on January 21st, we'll have the 120 Broadway office space application for the commission, where I assume we will be preparing.
Surprised you didn't schedule it for Wednesday.
Yes, it all depends on the public hearing.
I don't know if we'll have floor plans by then exactly, but as you can see, we are trying to put this on a very fast track. And with that, anything else, Madam Secretary?
No, Mr. Chair.
We stand adjourned. Happy New Year to you all, and I look forward to a terrific 2015 working with all of you. Thanks.